So here's the behind the scenes for A Doll Distorted, which is a short film I made entirely as a two-person crew. And I thought I'd talk about the process of making the film in the unusual way it was made. On this film, I did a bunch of different jobs besides directing, from the writing, producing, to the set design, cinematography, sound design, VFX, music, editing, and others. And maybe this will also be interesting if you're a filmmaker who's ever in a situation where you don't have much funding available or crew available, but you still want to make something of a high production value, which is hopefully what we achieved on the film. So an important point for me right off the bat was that I knew I wanted the film to have a powerful visual atmosphere. So this is one of the rooms I was working with, which was in a building I was living in at the time. And as you can see, it has very dull yellow walls and it just doesn't look very cinematic. However, by the end of designing the set and lighting it, I think the final results look very different. The process involved here was something I used for each set in the film. This was done by just drawing out some plans for the set and really just working on it in a series of layers to try to get to that final result. One of the first main things I did here was to just get a good base and wallpaper the room, and then to add character I sprayed on some mud and water to create this worn-in, damp, aged look. I think these types of subconscious details really add a lot. And mud was actually a cheap thing I used throughout the project to make props and clothes feel more authentic and worn in. So this is where things got interesting. I was living in a building where I had already designed the main set that the majority of the film takes place in, and I had now designed a storyboard specifically for the few rooms. However, I was being informed that the building I was in was scheduled to have a serious extension made, which now needed to be fast-tracked by several months. Initially, I planned to apply for funding to get a proper crew to make the project in a conventional way, but I realized by the time any funding came through, this set I had available and planned for would be destroyed. My last short film I had made entirely as a one-person crew, so since I was still living in the building, I thought let's just pick up a camera and see what I could get done in the time I had with what I had available, and if it doesn't work out, then anything that I learned can be used next time around to do it more conventionally. There was, however, a person in my area who was willing to help out as a lighting and camera assistant. So with that, we had the full crew for the project, and that's why the credits for the film are bizarrely short. Aside from directing and producing, my next main priority was the cinematography. The challenge for the cinematography was to make it look impressive and haunting without it taking up too much time to set up between takes. Because while I was doing the cinematography, I would be doing the other jobs, and I didn't want to have to be playing around with elaborate lighting setups, as one thing I didn't have much of was time. I've always loved classical paintings where the subjects are lit by a single light source, and how the art of that particular style is that not everything is meant to be lit perfectly. So I try to use practical and Rembrandt style lighting as much as possible. Trying to use just one film light was also very handy because it simplified the setup throughout the shoot instead of a more time consuming 3-point lighting setup. When I first got the mannequin, which is meant to be a love doll in the film, I wanted to make it look as sinister as possible as time went on, but as you can see it doesn't look very threatening. But I found that when I lit the doll in a certain way, it could really change its appearance. For the camera, I was using my first generation Blackmagic Ursa 4K, which is a great camera, but it was before any software upgrades and was suffering from really noisy grain and shots that were slightly underexposed. So to combat this, I would overexpose certain shots and plan it for the grade, and then really push the grade in post. To get the doll to move, I wanted something that looked realistic, so my first approach was just to use puppetry. And then I got James to rock the chair while I moved the doll's arms. And when I comped this out in After Effects, the final shot was actually very effective. Then to make the doll look more evil at times, I would track the shot in post and then add layers of grunges and face morphs to the footage. And then for any sections that would be practically difficult to film, I would break them down into sections and then composite them together. During this time, I had to move to a bungalow as the first property had now become unlivable and the rooms were being knocked down. Originally, the set was meant to be set in a more typical large, creepy house and had some climax scenes where the character was running around into different rooms being chased by the doll. These types of scenes that required a lot of space just wouldn't work in a small bungalow, so I had to adapt the climax to have scenes that would now work well in a more confined space. And the new location also presented some fun challenges. One was to do any reshoots that involved a set that got destroyed. So for some shots I would create the room in post and composite it in. This is where the dark, underexposure style of the cinematography also came in handy because it can hide any flaws in the shots. Another challenge that I've often found can arise in making a film in a small location is that sometimes there simply isn't enough rooms, or certain rooms that you would like to exist don't exist. We had an issue like this on the film where I wanted the character to get pushed down a cellar in the kitchen, but in this bungalow it didn't exist. So when I needed to pretend there was an extra room, I would just stick an actual door on the wall that was thrown out from the previous building, and I would build a frame around it. Then using some simple editing, I could time it so that we see a wide shot of the fake door on the wall, and then when we see her approach the door and open it, we're actually not in the kitchen but in a completely different room in a different house, where I put up some boards behind a real door to create the impression that she was looking into a dark cellar. This is just a technique I used to not be confined by the limitation of a house or a set and stitch as many fake rooms into the house as I wanted. In terms of the sound design and the music, we couldn't record any sound on set during the first half of the film because as we were filming there was a lot of drilling and hammerwork going on outside the property by the builders. So to maintain consistency, I just decided to do all the sound and post afterwards. And there were many other fun challenges we faced in making the film. In the end, I was really happy with the final film and the way it came out, and was thrilled with the reaction and response on the festival circuit. No one was ever able to tell the minimalistic way we made the film as well, which was amazing. One of the things I would get asked about by people when they found out was the nature of juggling all the different roles. And what I tell people is that when you're doing all these different jobs on your own, you don't have to know how to be a professional in all these different areas. All you have to learn is how to do the very specific thing you need to achieve within that profession. For instance, in cinematography, you don't need to know how to be Roger Deakins. All you have to know is how to create the very specific look for your film, and not the thousands of other possible looks. And this was an approach I took to doing the VFX work, the sound design, the music, the editing, the set design, the cinematography, the producing, and all the other jobs. When you break things down in this way, I think everything becomes a lot less daunting. Nothing for me replaces working with a crew, which I would have loved if it was available. But at the same time, I think you can learn a huge amount if you try all these different trades at least once. You definitely learn how to make something with a high production value a lot more frugally, and it gives you a far more comprehensive understanding of every different person's job on set, which has helped me enormously in directing crews since the film. So that was the behind the scenes for Adult Distorted. I hope you liked it, and I hope you loved the film. I really enjoyed making it, and let me know if you have any questions or comments below, and I'll be happy to answer them.